This is the final closing for the prosecution in the case of State versus Harris for the final examination of Professor Canava's trial advocacy class. So, one final time, I would like to say good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You know what this case is about. You know what this case is about based on the hours and hours of testimony and time that you've spent here with us today. This is a case about how on March 3rd, a man's life was turned upside down. Why was it turned upside down? Because that man over there couldn't let a simple argument in a bar fight go, and he couldn't control his temper. And when that man over there, Mr. Harris, stalked Henry Fordyce into that alley, this is the end result. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the end result. And this is what happens when you can't control yourself. And when Mr. Harris stalked him into that alleyway, that was the remedy that he decided was to hit him point blank in the back of the head with a blunt object, specifically with a large wooden broomstick. Instead of handling it like an adult, that was his recourse in that situation, as you have seen based on the testimony. This caused him multiple skull fractures, as you've seen from the pictures and the evidence from the hospital room. And on top of all this, you're aware that it cost him to miss multiple months of work and ultimately put a great strain on his livelihood. So we have proven to you today each and every element of assault with a deadly weapon. Gerald Harris had the intent to cause serious bodily injury to Mr. Fordyce, and you know this based on the testimony of Felson and the people in the bar, how they tried to talk this man off a ledge, but he couldn't help himself from wanting to go back and settle the score. When deadly weapon comes to mind, you know, most might think of a gun or a knife or something along those lines. However, I want to caution you that this blunt object that Mr. Harris used to attack Mr. Fordyce could most certainly be classified as a deadly weapon based on the material it's made out of, based on the blunt force that this man used. And you have heard testimony about the way he hit him in the head with it. And then I also want you to consider the amount of skull fractures that were caused as a result. And you will come to understand how this man was truly in fear and was in actual danger for his life, which satisfies the idea of serious bodily injury. As we are well aware in today's day and age, based on talks of CTE in football, and we've seen how blunt force to the head can be really life-threatening. Certainly, we're thankful that Henry is recovering, but at this time, based on the viciousness of the attack, there's no possible way that it could be classified as anything else other than a serious bodily injury. And I want you to look at them for yourselves and see the multiple skull fractures from the hospital reports, and really come to understand that this was in fact real danger. And you heard today what happened when he walked into that bar, that is Mr. Harris, and you've seen multiple things that go to this man's character. You've seen how he talks to women, and not just how he talks to women. You've also heard testimony today about how he puts his hands on women. Not just once, but twice. He put his hands on Ava in the bar. That's uncontested. You heard that come from his mouth. And he put hands on her in the alleyway when he stalked the two of them back there. And, he wasn't done there, was he? He couldn't just walk away at that point. He couldn't help himself, so to speak. But as we promised to show you at the beginning of this trial, ladies and gentlemen, he didn't want to fight fair or with honor, and he stalked them back to the alleyway, at which point he jumped them. You've heard testimony from Ava Long, who, might I contrast to Henry Fordyce, who they tried to tear down throughout this entire trial. They tried to slander this man, trying to say, how he might have been under the influence to the point where he couldn't, I guess, identify these men. You heard Ava, who testified to only having one alcoholic beverage that night, that she, without a doubt in her mind, was able to identify these men at a lineup. And throughout every point of the attack, she identified Harris hitting Henry over the head and also assaulting her in the process. And then you also heard from the bartender that he harassed all night that she saw him drive away from there shortly after when he claims he was at his girlfriend's house. And this evidence does not lie. Um, you you can put together this story that he tries to conjure up, saying that he was at his girlfriend's place, but as you know, she testified to having been asleep at that time. So there's no way we could have placed her at her house after midnight. The only place that we could have placed this man was driving away, speeding off, as the bartender has testified to, who was another person that he also had harassed that night. And this is a pattern here that you saw develop of multiple instances of harassment and disparaging comments towards women and a confrontational attitude. And I just want to have it firmly stick in your mind that you remember the old saying that actions can speak louder than words. Well, every single one of Gerald Harris's actions that day made it very clear what transpired. And as a result of these three elements, which I'll reiterate: intent, based on the conversations that he had with Felsen that you heard that man testify to, which demonstrated that there was nothing other than going back to that bar as an option for what Gerald Harris wanted to do. Two, serious bodily injury based on the blunt force to the head with the wooden broomstick that, as you saw, caused multiple fractures and injuries, and the serious bodily injury that has also resulted from that. Those are the three elements. We have proven them to you based upon proof beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant caused this injury in that alleyway, and as a result of this proof, beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, you, ladies and gentlemen, must return a verdict of guilty. And I want to thank you for your time. And again, you have a tremendous responsibility in this case, and you must return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.